Ezio was born on June 24, 1459, and was a Florentine nobleman during the Renaissance. For the early years of his upbringing, he was completely unaware of his family's connections to the Assassin Order. That was until he was 17, where he would witness the hanging of his father and two brothers, and was forced to flee his birthplace with his mother and sister. The three would take refuge at his uncle's villa, and from that point on he would continue his family's work and would train to become an assassin and take his vengeance against the Templar Order. Over the next 22 years, Ezio would take part in a series of events that would have him weaken the Templars' control in the region while attempting to gain possession of a mysterious item known as the Apple of Eden. In 1499, Ezio would battle Rodrigo Borgia, now going by the name Pope Alexander VI, and would defeat him in a fight. After defeating Rodrigo, Ezio would take the apple into the depths of the Vatican vaults, where he would be confronted by a hologram who seemed to be speaking to someone named Desmond before disappearing and leaving Ezio with even more questions. After returning to his uncle's villa with the Apple of Eden and informing his allies and family of what he had seen within the Vatican vaults, the villa would be attacked by an army led by Rodrigo's son, Caesar Borgia, who would be successful in not only recovering the Apple of Eden, but would go on to kill Ezio's uncle. Seeking vengeance once again, Ezio would make his way to Rome, and over the next 8 years would help build up the strength of the Italian Brotherhood of Assassins, while also weakening the influence of the Borgia family over Italy. By 1503, Ezio became one of the Order's greatest mentors, working alongside his assassins and allies, and was successful at destroying Caesar's military defenses, as well as his war machines, and cutting off his funds by killing one of Caesar's primary generals during the reign of Pope Alexander VI. After this, Rodrigo Borgia would then be killed by his enraged son Caesar, allowing Ezio to regain possession of the Apple of Eden, which he would use to decimate the remnants of the Borgia forces. Caesar Borgia would attempt to escape Rome, but would be arrested and sent to a prison in Spain. While Caesar sat in prison, Ezio and the Assassin Order would spend the next number of years wiping out the last remnants of the Borgia support in Rome. In 1507, Caesar would escape prison and would rally an army large enough to conquer Spain, Rome, and Italy, but would be killed by Ezio, with Caesar's death leading to the eradication of the Templars in Italy. In 1511, Ezio would join forces with the Ottoman Brotherhood of Assassins and would help them battle the Byzantine Templars for the next few years before retiring as mentor of the Italian Brotherhood. During his retirement, he would live the quiet life with his wife Sophia and would even go on to become a father. In the last month of his life in 1524, after enjoying a quiet decade-long retirement, Ezio would eventually meet a young woman named Xiao Jin, who asked for his help to learn a few things so she could return to China to rebuild the Assassin Order there. While Xiao was with Ezio, the two would be attacked by members of the Templar Order, but they would be successfully defeated. Xiao Jin would then depart for China, with Ezio giving her a tiny box as a gift. Shortly after this, however, while Ezio was visiting the market with his wife Sophia and their daughter, Ezio would pass away peacefully at the age of 65. Ezio left a lasting legacy that would affect the Assassin Order across all of Europe, with his descendants taking leading roles in the Assassin Order for the next 5 centuries, making Ezio one of the most influential assassins in the entire Order's history. Edward Kenway was born on March 10, 1693, into a family of farmers, but during his upbringing he decided that a simple farmer's life would not work for him, and he sought a life of riches and fame. In 1712, Edward would marry a woman named Caroline. However, Caroline's father did not approve of their marriage, and wanting to prove that he could make a better life for himself and become a better man, he decided that he would become a privateer. Seeking a better life, Edward would eventually find himself joining the Royal Navy and would even take part in fighting the War of the Spanish Succession. But when the war ended, he, along with many other sailors, found themselves out of work and forced into a life of piracy in order to survive. During one of his travels, the ship that he was on was attacked, and Edward would wash ashore, being the only survivor. It was then that he would kill a member of the Assassin Brotherhood who was planning to defect to the Templars, and after stealing his clothes and unknowingly continuing on the traitor's agenda, he would first hear of something called the Observatory. Edward's quest to find the Observatory would have him not only fighting against high-ranking members of the Templar Order, but would also put him at odds with members of the Assassin Brotherhood, who did not like that Edward was only seeking the Observatory for himself and did not work towards a higher purpose. Eventually, thanks to the aid of Captain Bartholomew Roberts, Edward would finally see for himself exactly what the observatory was and how it operated, but was shortly then after betrayed by Roberts and was taken to a prison on Jamaica. While escaping the prison, his friend Mary Read would die, with her final request being that Edward would do right by her and clean up the mess that he had caused, and from that moment on, Edward would officially ally himself with the Assassin Brotherhood. Seeing that Roberts was a threat to everyone, Edward would hunt him down, only to later find out that the Templars had found the location of the observatory, and it was there that Edward would have to battle and kill the Templar Grand Master. With the Templars defeated and the observatory secured, Edward, along with the Assassin Brotherhood, agreed to seal off the observatory once and for all. After this, however, Edward would receive a letter informing him that his wife Caroline had died of smallpox 2 years ago, but that she had a daughter shortly after Edward had left to become a privateer. Edward would arrange a meeting between himself and his daughter Jennifer, and Edward then moved to London with Jennifer, where he would join the British Brotherhood and eventually be given the rank of Master Assassin. Shortly after gaining the rank of Master Assassin, Edward would meet a woman named Tessa, and by 1725 the two would be married and would even go on to have a son who they'd name Haytham Kenway. Over the next 10 years, Edward would continue to lead the British Brotherhood against the Templars and would even go on to train his son Haytham in their ways. But by December 3rd, 1735, Edward's house would be invaded and his daughter Jennifer would be kidnapped. And after making sure that his wife Tessa and his son Haytham were hidden away, Edward would battle the remaining two invaders, only to be killed by one of them. Well, what's up again, guys? Brian here at 3Tier, here to present my next Versus Series matchup, and this time we will be venturing into the world of Assassin's Creed, with my first two combatants being two, if not the two most popular assassins in the franchise, as Ezio the Assassin takes on Edward the Pirate. Sorry, all tier fans, I'm going to put him as number 3 on my list. Now, since the rules of these two operating are very different than that of characters from franchises like Final Fantasy, Resident Evil, and even Devil May Cry, we will have to cut a couple corners when it comes to comparing these two against each other. For starters, this matchup is only going to be focusing on pitting Ezio as he was at the end of Assassin's Creed 2 against Edward as he was at the end of Assassin's Creed 4. Now, we're not going to waste any time comparing the physical capabilities because physically, though both combatants are still in very good shape, there is no question that Edward would have the advantage being so much younger. Ezio was in his 40s by the end of Assassin's Creed 2, while Edward would only be about 29 entering his physical prime. And on top of that, Edward's lifestyle would have not only kept him extremely active as a combatant, but he has proven to be extremely effective in battle as well, and has certainly taken his fair amount of punishment over his lifetime and has the scars to prove it. But that's not to say that Ezio is by any means weak. For a 40-year-old man, he is still very capable, and I would even say that he would reach his maximum potential as a combatant during Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. But that doesn't change the fact that he would more likely experience a good amount of trouble contending with someone who is considerably far faster, far agile, and far younger than himself. So I don't think it's too much of a stretch to give Edward the solid advantage in physical capabilities here. Now, in terms of special abilities, which neither of these guys have any to speak of outside of their shared use of Eagle Vision, which I don't think is going to be very effective or even come into play in this matchup, which means this contest is going to come down to who has the better arsenal of weapons and who is better at using them in combat. So let us begin as I compare their weapons. At any one time, Ezio can carry up to 5 different weapons at once. The most recognizable weapon that all members of the Assassin Brotherhood use is a pair of hidden blades. Now, depending on which character or which era of the Brotherhood you're looking at, they can vary to certain degrees, but Ezio's hidden blades extract when he curls his wrists, and the blades themselves measure at about 6 to 8 inches long. The blade itself is also capable of injecting an opponent with a poison which can kill them in moments, but only if Ezio is able to get it close enough and use it without them knowing. One of the more unique weapons that Ezio has at his disposal is a prototype pistol attached to Ezio's left hidden blade. This prototype pistol can be effective at close to medium ranges, but due to this weapon being so primitive, Ezio, when using it, requires him to be remaining completely still, and it takes a good amount of seconds in order for him to properly aim and then fire an accurate shot, and requires both his hands to use his weapon effectively, and only holds one shot at a time, requiring a few moments to reload it. Ezio also wears a metal cestus on his right hand, and this can be used to deliver strong physical punches. He also carries about 10 throwing knives that can be effective at short to medium ranges. Now, this is the part that gets a little bit tricky, because when it comes to Ezio's small and primary sword, there is no official sword that he uses, and it is all based off of the player's choice. So, to keep it simple, I will be granting him access to the best of both worlds within the game. So, his small sword is called this? Yeah, I'm not good at saying that. And from what I can tell by just looking at this weapon, it seems to be length at about 15 inches from the tip of the blade to the butt of the handle, with the blade itself measuring at about 12 inches. Because of its size, Ezio could use this weapon with great speed and using it with reverse grip, but because of it, it does make it a bit hard to deflect some weapons, and it requires a lot of power behind it in order to be used effectively, but itself has trouble probably deflecting more power blows against other opponents. Ezio's final weapon, and the one he's most popular for, is actually the Sword of Auditore. Now, this weapon actually belonged to the legendary assassin himself, and this sword was forged from smooth and silver metal, with the crossguard being shaped like eagle wings and the pommel being shaped as an eagle's head. This weapon measures at about 3.5 feet long and is exceptionally effective in battle, granting excellent speed in combat, and is even capable of slashing and piercing through armor. Edward can carry up to 6 different weapons at once, and like Ezio, he also carries a pair of hidden blades. However, they are much simpler in their design and use. He also carries 1 throwing knife as opposed to Ezio's 10, however, that is where the similarities between the two end. Exclusive to him, Edward has a blowpipe which was given him by the assassins, and this thing can fire 2 different types of darts at very long distances. Sleep darts can obviously put an opponent to sleep quickly, while berserk darts can send an opponent into a raging state, attacking anyone in sight. Edward also carries a rope dart which was also given to him by the assassins, and just to keep it simple, this rope dart works exactly like Scorpion's spear from Mortal Kombat. Edward can not only fire this rope dart at an opponent to pull them in, leaving them open to a killing blow, but if Edward uses this in the right position, he can actually use this weapon to hang an opponent. Now, as cool as all these weapons are, when it comes to being a pirate on the high seas, there are only 2 kinds of weapons that one will fall in love with, and Edward was no different, and that would be Edward's pistols and his twin swords. Now, if we had to give Ezio the best short and primary sword, then we have to do the same for Edward. Edward's best pistols were set in a collection of gold flintlock pistols. Now these babies are extremely powerful and can not only cause maximum damage to all kinds of opponents, but are effective at all ranges, and Edward carries no less than 4 of them on him at all times. But by far, Edward's favorite weapons are his pair of pistol swords, which, as the name states, are swords that have a gun built into them, which allows Edward to fire off a shot in the direction the blades are pointing towards. Okay, this one is pretty obvious to call, but let's go down the list. Both Ezio and Edward have hidden blades that will cancel out each other, seeing how both would easily recognize each other as being members of the assassins, so hidden blades are a given, so both would take care to make sure the other was not even given a chance or be put in a position to make these weapons effective against the other. Ezio does have the advantage in terms of throwing knives, but I doubt that he would be able to throw enough of them to contact Edward to put him down for good. In response, Edward has his rope dart and his blowpipe that could be used against Ezio, and seeing how both of these weapons are unlike anything Ezio has ever seen before, he might lack any kind of counter maneuver, as the rope dart would undoubtedly be effective against Ezio, leaving him opening to a following killing strike, and the use of sleep darts or berserk darts would allow Edward to instantly end the fight immediately. When it comes to their pistols, Ezio has one built into his left hidden blade that requires both hands to operate and takes a minimum of 5 seconds to fire an accurate shot, and is only effective at close medium ranges while Ezio is remaining completely still. while Edward carries 4 golden flintlock pistols that can be fired very quickly and can accurately hit a target at about 3 to 4 times the range of Ezio's pistols. Finally, when it comes to comparing Ezio's short sword and primary sword against Edward's twin pistol swords, there's just no contest. The pistol swords easily match the speed of both Ezio's short sword and the sword of Auditore, and just like the rope dart, blowpipe, as well as the flintlock pistols, all of these weapons are unlike anything Ezio has ever seen before. Therefore, he might have some trouble responding to all of these weapons in the heat of a battle. On top of that, one technique that Edward uses pretty often that Ezio has never practiced nor was ever trained to do in Assassin's Creed 2 was how to apply multiple weapons at once, as Edward has been shown using both a sword in one hand while wielding a pistol in the other. Now, before anyone tries to bring up the fact that Ezio's medal cestus is in this battle, it would be completely useless, as in this fight he is wearing it on his primary right hand, which is the same one that he wields his weapon in, so obviously he can't use both at the same time. And please do not try to bring up the fact that Ezio has Auditore's armor that Ezio would have picked up when he received the sword. And just to be fair, I don't think this armor was ever designed to withstand gunfire. And also, please do not try to bring up the fact that Ezio also has smoke bombs that he could use to distract Edward, as I'm sure it would not work very well against someone who has eagle vision, and on top of that, Edward has smoke bombs too. Now, I don't mean to completely downplay Ezio's gear, because he has proven that it is all very effective in his own time period, but in terms of equipment, he is bringing nothing to this fight that Edward doesn't A. already have himself, B. already knows how to deal with and can attack with a weapon that Ezio has never seen before, and C. has a far more technologically advanced and effective version of it himself. And for all these reasons, Edward Kenway gets the edge in weapons. Ezio in his own right was a very capable fighter. However, it is clear by his arsenal and his history of assignments that were mostly assassination missions over the course of Assassin's Creed 2 that his direct approach methods took a back seat. His use of the hidden blades, poison blades, the throwing knives, and even the pistol seemed to suggest that as an assassin, his preferred tactic was to get in, take out the target, and get out of the area as quickly as possible. His Uncle Mario taught him the fundamental basics of sword fencing on how one could pound an opponent's guard, outmaneuver an opponent with a counter technique, or simply unarm the opponent and use their own weapon against them. And should he find himself in a really difficult spot where escape was impossible, Ezio always seemed to rely on a defensive stance and simply waiting patiently for an opponent to attack, allowing him to counterattack and take his opponents down one by one. While his use of his primary sword and short sword were undoubtedly well toned, it is my belief that he would have preferred the use of these weapons only as a fallback option should he need them. I do not believe that by this time he would have had a top master level of skill against a single well-trained opponent, since I personally believe that he would reach his peak during Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, and since engagements like this were pretty rare over a 20-year period. And his techniques and experience have proven that Ezio would have trouble against multiple opponents applying different weapons at once, or against an opponent who could apply a seriously high-level power-like offense, forcing Ezio to have to find a way around the offense rather than attempting to hold it off. Edward was in no shape or form a standard combatant, and certainly did not favor applying the methods and techniques of the assassins as they were used at the time. Edward, having spent years fighting in the War of the Spanish Succession, had a large amount of combat experience, and though it was mostly Navy-based, it certainly would have led to engagements where crew members jumped aboard opposing ships and fought the opposing crew in close quarters fighting. However, Edward by the end of Assassin's Creed 4 took this to the next level and made the methods and techniques of the assassins work for him and simply applied them with a far more aggressive approach. Thanks to his arsenal of weapons, Edward could apply all of his methods in assassination as well as in direct combat approaches. His usual approach to combat was to apply his dual swords and could easily apply slashes, stabs, countering, and blocking maneuvers from different directions. But instead of simply waiting for an opponent to attack, Edward, when on the offense, could simply cut down his opponents very quickly, always prepared for whether or not another opponent was targeting him, and could easily engage another opponent and take them down, sometimes even in combinations. He could even apply physical strikes and countering while wielding his weapons, and was exceptionally skilled at using the environment to his advantage. But what made Edward even more dangerous when it comes to his combative options was not only how he could switch between his weapons so fluently, but how he could even apply multiple different weapons at once, sometimes even in combination. The only opponents that Edward ever had true difficulty with were bigger and more powerful focused opponents that were significantly stronger than him, and if he was attacked while he was engaged with another opponent, it could make it very difficult for Edward to respond. This verdict can be summed up to one simple sentence. Ezio is an assassin, while Edward is a fighter. While Ezio himself can fight, he could not hope to match Edward's offensive might and flexible capabilities. This all can be compared to my Gray Fox vs. Sam matchup when comparing the differences between a ninja and a samurai. A ninja would have the advantage if they could catch the samurai off guard and apply a weapon or technique that they are not prepared for. But once the samurai is allowed to rally and forces the ninja into a head-to-head contest, the ninja would find themselves at a serious disadvantage being forced into the samurai's game, and that applies here as well. Ezio would prefer to try to assassinate an opponent and would only draw his sword if he had no choice, while direct head-to-head combat is Edward's favorite approach in combat, and when it comes to their techniques and how they would apply them, Ezio is again at a disadvantage. Many would say that Ezio has had more practical experience than Edward has since he's been an assassin for 20 years, and though this is certainly true, it's the wrong kind of experience. Ezio to me is what you would call a textbook combatant, and even with 20 years of experience of being an assassin, suffers from what Count Dooku from Star Wars called enslavement to form. Ezio is the perfect type of an assassin who operates within the rules and techniques of engagement that an assassin would follow during that time, while Edward took the complete opposite approach and made up his own rules and is more than willing to fight dirty to win, which would certainly give Ezio a significant amount of trouble. And what's even worse for Ezio is he is applying the same methods and techniques with his primary sword when it comes to direct combat that the head officers of the Royal British Navy would be using 200 years later. They were just forced to operate during a chaotic battle, which means right from the get-go, Edward would know exactly the capabilities and limitation of Ezio's combative approach, and with Ezio being so defensive during this period of his life, would give Edward plenty of time to choose what weapon he wants to use and what the pace of the engagement will be, and none of Ezio's other weapons would give him the creativity or flexibility to catch Edward off guard. In battle, one must always be acting, never reacting. And if at any time Ezio attempts to go on the offense, then Edward could easily outmaneuver Ezio's single sword offense, or even simpler, could just create distance and shoot him at any range. And before anyone says that Ezio could dodge Edward's gunfire, Edward has proven that he is more than capable of hitting movement targets from all ranges. When all is said and done, Ezio simply lacks the combative flexibility and the right type of combat experience to outfight or even catch Edward off guard in a head-to-head contest, and it is for these reasons that Edward gets the edge in martial skills and battle tactics. Okay folks, I really have to apologize for this matchup because this is one of those matchups that, due to its popularity amongst the fans, sounds like an awesome idea, but when you really take a practical look at these two combatants and see what each of them is bringing to this contest along with what they've been able to do with their skill sets, even the most hardcore fans have to admit that Ezio can't win this fight. As stated earlier, he has virtually no experience in 20 years fighting against another assassin in a head-to-head contest, or any kind of an opponent that would prepare him for someone like Edward. His weapons in the departments that count the most are completely outclassed, and his primary means of killing, which are the dual hidden blades, are things that Edward has too, so he would take care to make sure Ezio was never even given a chance to use them. Ezio, in all honesty, would be fighting an opponent far younger and far deadlier in a straightforward fight than himself. Now surely, Edward was not the first pirate to become an assassin, but he was the first to be able to operate as effectively during that time frame. Ezio was the perfect assassin for his time and follows all of the rules about how one conducts themselves within the assassin order. But Edward operated by his own rules and made the ways and techniques of the assassins work for him. By the time Edward would first be introduced into the world of the assassins and the Templars in 1715, Ezio would have been dead for at least 191 years, and if we go back even further to the end of Assassin's Creed 2, Edward would have the advantage of 216 years of combative innovation. To be honest, a more balanced contest would be if Edward were to fight against his grandson Connor, as both operate against the same form of enemies within the same century using very similar equipment, or at least equipment that they would be familiar with, in a time in which both of them had the same approach of having their own unique backgrounds and combative approaches and just adopted the assassin methods to work for them rather than being molded into an assassin like Ezio was. And on top of that, both Edward and Connor had experience fighting against not only members of the assassins in Edward's case, but against opponents who not only had the training, but extensive knowledge and experience in the ways of the assassins, as Connor fought against his father, who just so happened to have been trained directly by Edward. Any fight between these two would end with either Ezio being overwhelmed and outmaneuvered by Edward's more ferocious yet controlled dual sword offense, being caught off guard by either Edward's blowpipe or combination of his rope dart, which would leave Ezio open to a killing strike from either one or both of his swords, or more likely simply being fatally shot by either one of Edward's 4 flintlock golden pistols or one of the 2 pistol swords that Edward would be using. The most that Ezio could do is perhaps get 1 or 2 knife hits on Edward, which would result in Edward immediately pulling out one of his guns and shooting Ezio. His skills with his single blade will not help, as he is not pounding through Edward's guard, outmaneuvering his 2-sword offense, or finding a way to disarm Edward of one of his swords. And Ezio would not have the time to apply his pistol, because if at any moment Edward sees or even suspects that Ezio is trying anything funny, Edward would immediately shoot Ezio, as Edward can get off 4 shots off faster than it would take Ezio to get off 1 accurate shot from medium range. So it is for all these reasons that I declare Edward the Pirate the winner. Now, I'm sure many of the Ezio fanboys and girls out there are upset with this outcome, but please understand that I myself am one of you. Ezio is without question my favorite assassin, is undoubtedly the best character in the franchise, who has had a far better story to tell and has had far more impact than Edward ever did in his life. But just because Ezio is a better assassin and overall character does not mean he is a better combatant, as there are several other individuals within the franchise that could take a shot at that title. And as hard as I try, I just can't come up with a really good answer for how Ezio could even make up for 2 whole centuries of combative innovation. But to be straight with all of you, I do concede that Ezio during Brotherhood and Revelation would certainly stand a better chance, but the result would still be the same. One simply has the equipment and combative creativity to operate in a much more dangerous time. But I would really like to hear your guys' thoughts. Do you agree with me that Edward is simply too far ahead of Ezio for him to win? Or do you believe that some miracle could happen that would allow Ezio to defeat Edward in a straightforward fight? Share your thoughts with me and everyone else in the comments down below, and if you liked this video, please share and subscribe to keep track of me and my future matchups and other videos. And like always, thank you guys for watching, you're awesome, and like always, here's a preview of my next 3TR versus series matchup.